Steve talked about the idea of us regular people shaping our destiny. Well, destiny is the context in which I want to introduce our next speaker, Jim Wunderman, who is the president and executive director of the Bay Area Council from San Francisco. Sometimes destiny comes calling, and we have the choice either to answer its call or not. Jim Wunderman wrote an op-ed last fall after the state budget had been late for the 23rd time in the last 32 years about the dysfunction in Sacramento. And I don't think that he could have anticipated the grassroots movement that swelled in response and the people who started contacting him and his colleagues from all over California. The thing that has impressed me the most about Jim, in addition to his good ideas that he has about this process, is that destiny called, and he stepped up and answered, not just by putting forward his own ideas, but I've watched this man being a steward for a process that is bigger than any of us. And for that, I think we should be very thankful that history asked the right person. Please welcome Jim Wunderman.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. That's you always say thank you for the kind introduction, but I have to say sincerely that's about the kindest introduction anybody could ever have. So that was very sweet. I appreciate it. And I'm.
A little louder.
Can you? Move your? I know I'm turned on, but I don't know if I'm turned.
Move it up a little bit.
Put up a little bit more.
Yeah.
What I said was I appreciate that. The short form. And I apologize for being late, and I promise you when we have a constitutional convention, we're going to get rid of all the traffic congestion between LAX and Santa Monica. It's my first promise as constitutional convention-eer. So, well, it's great to be here, and again, thank you so much for assembling this. And it has been kind of a wild ride, and I'll give you a little bit of background, a little bit more flavor for how we got here, and you follow up on Stephen's thoughts. You know, and first of all, the Bay Area Council, we are a business group, and so I'm the CEO of a business group that represents large and medium-sized businesses in the Bay Area on public policy issues. And most of those public policy issues, they tend not to be too partisan in nature. They tend to be the grittier issues of things like transportation, and I don't know if education is gritty, but you know, things that contribute collectively to the quality of life and the economy, and you know, our hopes of having a better society. And we tend not to have too much friction with other groups, but as a business group, you know, I would say we have tended to be a little bit more progressive than some other business groups. For example, you know, we were the business group that was the sponsor of AB 32. The Greenhouse Gas Initiative a couple of years ago. So you get you know, we are from crazy Bay Area, right? And we look at things a little bit differently, but in a maybe more innovative, inventive way. But at the end of the day, we do represent business. And business, like any other group that has an interest in what's happening in the state, can become very, very frustrated when they see inaction, and they could interpret the inaction in terms of what that means for the future. So we were hoping, like many of you here and others, and congratulations for being here on a Friday night, that indicates your passion and interest in what's happening here in the state, or maybe it says something else about you, but we're all here together. You know, we're really worried, and we were kind of angry, and I was a little embarrassed to bring business leaders up to Sacramento and have legislators one after the other come before us and talk about how nothing was getting done. The big five weren't even talking about the budget. This was just the next in the series of budget delays. In fact, the first of this year. I think there have been 5 of them now, and I think they're still locked up there as we speak. No shock. So we went back, and as Mike says, I wrote this piece with my consigliere, John Grubb, who's standing back there, basically saying our government has failed us. It was sent to, and we need to hold a constitutional convention, because we heard that suggestion. It was the only thing we heard when we went up to Sacramento that day. Well, that did in fact inspire a tremendous response, and some of the folks sitting here on the stage, as well as others, people I'd heard of but hadn't met, and people I used to know, and people I'd like to meet, wrote me notes and emails and things and said, wow, Jim, you know, can we actually have a constitutional convention? What would that mean? And so forth. So we began to do the research about the history of constitutional conventions and, you know, what it would take to have one in California and so forth. And we've obviously done a lot of work since then. That was about 11 months ago now, and we've really come a long way, obviously, to the point where at first people asked about it, but a lot of people scoffed at the idea. But no, you know, 5 budget delays later, $26 billion deficit later that nobody has a rational answer for. People aren't laughing anymore. I think they're asking the hard questions about it. How would it actually work? And, you know, can this really function? And what would be the best way to pick the delegates? And so we're having a constructive conversation about it now. You know, one of the things that you get when you travel around the state like this to talk to groups like you all about constitutional convention is people have a tendency to see this and issues through their own lens. And so, you know, the common question is, what would you like to see in a constitutional convention? What do you think what reforms are needed, and so forth? And so we've done a lot. And, you know, the good news is there's a lot of much more area of commonality between people, regardless of their political stripes or their geography or their gender or age, than you would think. I mean, there are definitely differences, but they're much closer aligned than they are in the building in Sacramento, where they're not aligned at all, and where in fact nothing gets done. And so when Steve talks about why an assembly of citizen delegates, the core of that really gets to the fact of what's actually happening in Sacramento. Now, just show me by hand, how many of you spend much time up in the Capitol, or you consider yourselves pretty familiar with it? So some of you, but not a huge number. If you spend a whole lot of time doing it, you'd have a sense that where we've come, the power, these lights are bright, and I must be reflecting a lot. I can use blinding little camera. That it's becomes so impossible for the institution to function because of the pressures that are being brought by. I think there's 1,200 registered lobbyists. Not just industries, and everybody thinks, well, it's big labor, big business, but it's a lot more than that. It's just about everybody with any skin in the game. The smallest special district from around the state, mosquito abatement district, has a lobbyist making sure that bill doesn't get through, and that's the tenor of things up there, and it's come to the point where everything is jammed up. So the big issues that we see, the education system, where we've fallen from the best in the country to the worst in the country in a fairly short time. The prison system overflowing with people who need to be in and people who don't need to be in, costing us $49,500 per prisoner. It was suggested yesterday at a meeting we had to send them to Harvard or something. It was about the same price. You can obviously go down the list of the issues, the transportation system, on and on, right? And but then there's the smaller issues too, and it's just paralysis that's taken place up there. So the idea is, the key thing we're trying to address with the Constitutional Convention, if anything, is to find a process for reform. We all need reform. We understand the system is broken, right? You think raise your hand if you think it's broken. Who might? So you agree with that? Then how do you get it? And the answer to the question seems to be you need to populate the process with people who have as little skin in the game as possible, who just want to do the right thing. They may have less experience, but that doesn't mean that they're dumb. They may have their own ideas about things, but they're capable of coming in collective fashion together for a single purpose, for the greater good. And I hear Stephen's examples, and I've heard of some others, and we think this is possible. It's not easy, and as he said, it may be the least worst approach, but it has the best potential, and it has to be done because we absolutely need these reforms. And the other approaches to doing it is either to have the legislature fix itself. We don't think there's a likelihood through the constitutional revision process that they would do it, because it also requires a 2/3 vote that's missing in action, or through initiative processes, which you have to follow the single subject rule, and so there's a tendency to have A, B, C, D, E, F, and before you know it, these things are getting picked off, and it's extremely expensive, and it's not a comprehensive systemic solution, right? Because maybe a couple of them pass and a couple of them fail. What we have is a system that was put together, well intended over the course of a century since the progressive era. That's a sort of ramshackle approach. So different things were done at different times for different reasons, and we now have this system that simply doesn't function well and only can be fixed by the people. Anything significant that needs to be done to reform the state has to be done by votes of the people. There's just no two ways about it. So the question again gets back to how to do it. I just flew up from Sacramento, and today there was a first of its kind summit of counties and school districts and cities, counties, cities, and school districts, multiple members of their councils and boards and so forth meeting together, first time ever, to try to address this, because obviously the local governments that provide the services to us, probably 95% of the services, they are really hogtied and they're scared, and it's almost impossible for them to face their constituents because they're making terrible decisions that affect the future of the state, and they're coming together to try to figure out what of these approaches are necessary. And so we talked about this, and the issue of the citizen delegates or large jury pool came up, and they scoffed a little bit, and I kind of reminded them, remember, these are the people who elected you, so they can't be that dumb, right? They actually might be pretty smart. So we had a good, robust conversation. I think there's a lot of people in local government who really get this and want to support a convention, and there's others who are concerned about it. But bottom line is they all seriously want and need reform to take place in California, because without serious reform, the future is kind of bleak. The process for this is that we have to amend the state constitution to enable the public to call a constitutional convention, because right now only the legislature has that right. Many other states have this ability. We don't have it. That would be on the ballot as a constitutional amendment in November 2010. Alongside would be another initiative. We don't think it's an amendment, it's an initiative that would actually then call the constitutional convention and spell out its terms, the delegate selection process, the items to be covered in the constitutional convention, the timing, the compensation, the logistics, and things like that. And then it would report out, and we think largely through a consensus process. This is not about a partisan process. This is not business as usual. In order to dig the Constitutional Convention, you have to sort of get rid of the pre-held views we have about government that's driven us to the place where we are, which is where nothing gets done. We're conservatives, we're progressives, we're independents, we're green, we're this and that. At the end of the day, we can all stare each other down, and the politics are ruled by the status quo. Nothing gets done, and we can't afford that anymore. So we see this convention as delivering consensus solutions where large percentages of the body would report out the same recommendations, and by nature they would have to be, it would have to represent a coming together of ideas, and obviously some give and take, and hopefully a systemic approach that has a heck of a lot better ideas than the ones that are in place. Clearly the system that we have in place must be the dumbest ideas ever, because they're failing us miserably, and we are becoming a national laughingstock, and it ain't funny. And you watch the national news and the questions that are coming, and this isn't the California. Some of us were lucky enough to have been born in the state. Not me, obviously, with this accent. Some of us came here because we were in search of a better place, and this isn't what we either were born here to become or came here to do. And so there's an opportunity here to change it and reclaim the leadership of California, and not have the University of California, which was the guiding light of higher education in the world, the model public institution in the world for higher education, basically soon to become, at best, an also-ran system. We're a couple of years away from that if we keep bleeding like this. And so it's not just about pumping more money into the system, it's a combination of that plus rationalizing the way money flows without the state, within the state, about getting more value for the tax dollars that are spent. Sacramento has no management system. Nobody can tell you what they got for what was put in. Definitely, we think the result of a constitutional convention would probably be a devolution of controls, fiscal and management from the state level down to the local level. School districts, forget about it. They have no interest in what goes on in the community at the school district level because the finance system for schools has nothing to do with development in the community or anything. It's all Sacramento driven through a finance schema up there. And the systems for counties and cities. It's amazing to see actually counties and cities working together. In my experience, those two are generally just competing with each other for ideas. Here they are coming together. It really tells you something. So, we're a business group. Mike said, congratulated me for providing leadership. It was just an idea that took hold. Our first action really was to reach out and form a coalition so that nobody could look at this and say, well, this is a business group that has some agenda. And just to stipulate, we think everything within governance should be on the table. That everything, we need to look at the whole system. We don't think it should be about every social issue. We know those are extremely powerful issues, but right now we have a broken government and we have a chance to deal with that, and we better deal with it. So we think there should be a very broad, first ever, extremely transparent, extremely robust discussion. We should use all the good technology that we've developed so that everybody, even if you're not a delegate, you can still weigh into the thing. You can be twittering in and doing all this kind of stuff so that the delegates have the benefit of the general public. I urge you to pay very strong attention to this. I thank you for coming out tonight. Try to be a supporter and a big supporter and tell your friends and that kind of thing, because it's going to be us that do it or it doesn't get done. So thank you, and thanks, Mike, for having me.